Hi, I'm Barry Ostrowski. At Barnabas Health, we believe citizens need to be informed about the important healthcare issues affecting their lives. That's why we're proud to support healthcare programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners on public television.
Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Barnabas Health. Life is better healthy. Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Wells Fargo. PSE&G, committed to improving New Jersey's economy and strengthening its communities. Johnson & Johnson. And by New Jersey Sharing Network, dedicated to saving lives through organ and tissue donation.
This is One-on-One.
When you first heard that they were doing Charlie Rose and Gayle King, didn't you go, what?
People like laughing at others, so I don't mind if the other is me.
See, you go right into the character. That's what it is.
I'm bringing families together a half an hour each week. Man, I'm doing something special.
And so I do feel successful.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. Welcome to a very special series we call Gone, But Not Forgotten, where we talk with some of New Jersey and national figures that had a great impact on our lives. On this particular edition of Gone But Not Forgotten, we talk to the one, the only, former mayor of New York City, Ed Koch. Ed Koch had roots in New Jersey. He actually lived in Newark, born in the Bronx, but lived in Newark. I sat down in 1993 with Ed Koch in his New York City law office. As usual, he had a lot to say about a whole range of issues, and more than once he asked, as he famously would do often during parades or rallies, "How am I doing?" Well, Ed Koch in this interview was doing just fine. 1993, gone, but not forgotten. The one, the only, Ed Koch. Let's talk about talk radio. Every day.
Yes.
11 to 12.
Yeah.
From right in your law office. You have a nice situation, Mr.
Sure I
Mayor.
do. I'm a very lucky guy.
You're very lucky. They hook you up and you do your radio show every day.
Yeah.
You're the #1 rated talk show host on radio?
Not on radio, I wouldn't say that, but on
your station.
On my station. And of the 45 stations in the New York region, I'm number 2 at 11 o'clock. The other one is a rock station. But I mean, Howard Stern has more people listening to him than to me.
Talk radio is getting more and more powerful.
Oh, I love it. And you know what I love about it?
I was going to ask you if it's a good thing, then I realized you're making money at it.
No, it has nothing to do with money, although I make a lot of money. There's no question about that.
You do make a lot of money, don't you?
On a whole host of things. But why not? I mean, look, they're not paying me because they don't produce. They're paying me because a lot of people have commercials on the air, right? And I write columns. The fact is,
you just went to the Daily News.
Mort Zuckerman, who is the owner of the Daily News, called me about the column that I had just submitted this week. He said it's one of the best columns he's ever read. He thought it was extraordinary. And I'm very proud of that. You know why I'm proud of it? Why I'm proud of how well I'm doing on radio and how well I'm doing in terms of my columns? Because the people who are talk hosts, they've never been mayor. The people who do the columns, they've never been mayor. Doing columns and being a talk host are not my shticks, using the vulgarization, right? That's somebody else's business. Being mayor was my business, right? And I did it well. But it's such a joy to be able to do these other things well, too. To beat them at their own game, if I can put it crudely.
And the media.
Yeah.
You have mixed feelings about the media, or
I
changed feelings?
despise the media, even though I'm part of the media now.
You really despise them?
Doesn't mean I have to like us. Oh yeah, the media. I'm not talking about everybody. There are lots of fine people. I'm talking about across the board. You know, generically. Why? Well, they hold people in public life to higher standards than they could possibly themselves subscribe to. As a public official. When I went to Congress, I filed my income tax records in public in the Congressional Record, net worth statements. My life's an open book. You don't know what an editorial writer who doesn't even sign his name to an editorial has by way of special interests. You don't know that. You don't know what those columnists have by way of special interests.
Should we know that?
Oh, I think so. I think every editorial should be signed. Every editorial should be signed, but they don't do it. So you know, an editorial is the product of one person. And we all think, oh my God, this is an institution. Must have been 1,000 people who applauded this before it was published. One person.
How do you respond, Ed, to the charge that many make in writing about your tenure as mayor, as time went on this issue of race, that much of your rhetoric tended to polarize, whether people understood or didn't understand the point where they felt that there was a sense...
what I say is this. When I was first elected in 1977, I got 50% of the vote in a four-way race. 4 years later, I ran for re-election, and I got 75% of the vote. And I carried every black assembly district. In my third term and third election, I got 78% of the vote. Now, that means that 22% of the people didn't support me. Now, I don't know how you can establish that you have broad support as a politician other than by going to the electoral results. And I don't know many people who in a city that is divided roughly 50% minority, roughly 50% white, and gets 78% of the vote. How can you tell me that I am divisive? You follow?
In the last few years, Mr. Mayor, what changed in those last few years so that the results changed and that there was a sense on the part of some about the polarization?
No, those are my enemies who would say polarization.
You just don't buy that?
I have to explain. A, if you're asking me why didn't I win a fourth term when I think I was a good mayor, and most people thought I was a good mayor. Well, there were several reasons. Some people would say, oh, it was because of corruption scandals. Not true. There were only 6 people who were indicted and tried and found guilty in high positions in my administration who went to jail. And I asked the judge to send them to jail for a long time, maximum sentences. I think that you will find proportionately, because I appointed thousands of people, that you have more proportionately corrupt in New Jersey, in Washington, in Albany.
Did you have to include New Jersey in that?
Well, sure. New Jersey has a reputation of corruption, regrettably. Newark in particular had terrible corruption.
City,
and Jersey
Hudson
City.
County, right.
Now, nobody ever questioned...
Nothing special about your administration.
Now, I'll explain to you. Nobody ever questioned my integrity. Nobody. Today, they don't. And I'm very proud of that, although one case of corruption is so destructive. You know, if you pride yourself on your own personal integrity, if the district attorneys and the U.S. attorneys didn't know about it, how the hell should I know about it? But nevertheless, it happened on my watch, and I accept responsibility. But that's not what defeated me. You know what defeated me? Longevity. No mayor had ever run for a fourth term. I'm the only one who ever ran for a fourth term. There were only 3 who served for 3 terms, LaGuardia, Wagner, and myself, and they have a library now for LaGuardia, Wagner, and Koch, and I'm very proud of that. So it was longevity. They get tired of you. But what is so wonderful is, as I walk around, you know, I do a lot of things. I'm a lawyer, columnist, radio commentator, teach at NYU, I write books.
Do commercials?
I do commercials. I mean, I do a lot of things. And I'm all over town. Everybody knows me. And as I walk around anywhere from 5 to 15 times a day, people will say to me, oh, Mayor, you must run again, you must run again. And my response is always the same. No. The people threw me out, and now the people must be punished. And
but you're joking.
Of course I'm joking. Okay. But there's a certain ring of truth, because invariably, those who I say this to, you know, jocularly with a little laughter, they will always say, but Mayor, we've been punished. How long?
Let's follow up on this issue of crime. You've talked a lot in many of your speeches around the country about 2 solutions that you see to dealing with crime in the cities. One is mandatory national service.
Well, you don't have it exactly right. My mandatory national civilian service relates to dealing with the disaffiliated. That's a better way of putting it. The disaffiliated are the youth in our inner cities, but there are also white disaffiliated youth, but to a lesser extent than black or Hispanic, who are living in our inner cities. And so what I have said is that we ought to do what President Kennedy had urged. Do something for your country. Now, President Clinton wants to do something, but it's voluntary. He has going to have 1,000 people this year who are going to be in some kind of civilian service.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with that. Those 1,000 kids who are going to be volunteering, they would have made it on their own. I have no problem about that. But you're not going to get the people who really need it. Those are the disaffiliated who are not going to volunteer. And the only way you can deal with them is to say that everybody at age 18 or upon graduation from high school, or if they dropped out before, irrespective of whether they have used drugs or have a criminal record, that or gender, race, makes no difference, no exceptions across the board. They must go into a civilian service corps for a year or two.
And what would they do there, Mayor?
Well, there are lots of things they could do. Firstly, you have to remove them from their environment. I remember Claude Brown, who wrote Man-Child in the Promised Land, a great black writer. When I was mayor, I called him and we had lunch together, and we talked about the youngsters who were doing so badly. And he said, Mayor, I don't know how anybody grows up normal in the ghetto. He said, they come home, there's only a mother, no father in most cases. The brothers and sisters in the family have different fathers. There's alcoholism, there's drug addiction, there's prostitution. He said, it's amazing that so many grow up normal. And he's absolutely right. I mean, the kids don't have a chance. So you got to take them out of their environment. Now, you can't limit mandatory service to blacks and Hispanics living in the inner city. So it has to be across the board. And that's why it's never going to happen. Because
it's never going to happen.
Yeah. I think it should, but it's never going to happen because middle-class white and black families will say, why do you want to take my kids? They're not disaffiliated, because the answer is, under our Constitution, you can't say you're disaffiliated, we're going to take you, and you're not, and you can stay. So it's got to be across the board. And to the middle-class families who have no problems, although I'm sure many do, you would say to them, remember what President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you. What is it that you can do for your country? And they can, if they will, support this. Now, once they're in...
Before we move on, go ahead. Tell
once
us exactly
they're in,
what happens there.
Then you put them into Army barracks operation, but they would do civilian work, working in the inner cities, maybe even constructing houses. People love the romantic idea of working on Indian reservations. Go work on an Indian reservation, whatever it is that gets them out of their environment. But while they're doing that, those who don't have a high school education because they dropped out, you compel them to get a GED, the equivalency. You compel them to go into drug treatment. To learn to read and write at 8th grade level. So many of them are functional illiterates, so they can't read and write. You give them the opportunity to learn a skill. If you had 50,000 good jobs to hand out into the inner cities today that required a skill, you couldn't get very many people to take them because they don't have the skills. So the jobs should be there when they come back into their community, when they've had this opportunity to acquire skills. That, to me, is really the only way to deal with the disaffiliated. Now, with respect to crime, the only way to deal with crime, and I distinguish between the two here. Many of the disaffiliated will become criminals, but I don't want to say
Once
that...
they've committed crimes, what do you do?
Okay. I believe that anyone who commits a crime, particularly a crime of violence, and I think that white-collar criminals should go to jail too. But I want to talk about the people who are destroying our lives, making us prisoners in our homes, destroying our communities. Those are the people who commit crimes of violence. It's not a big number. It's, you know, in the city of New York, last year, there were, according to New York City police reports, 1,500,000 felonies committed, but only 1/3 were reported. So 500,000 were reported. Of those that were reported, only 17,000 were ultimately arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. That's 3.5% of those who committed the felonies actually went to a state prison to serve felony time. Well, it's an outrage. I mean, you have better odds of not going to prison than you have at the track to win. I mean,
Mayor, that's because a lot of people say in the correction system, just not enough space for them.
Well, then we have to build the space. But I will tell you how that can be done as well. Not all these things are very reasonable, but it won't be done. And there's no will to deal with this. What the federal government should do is to build stockades, prisons that are minimum security in the deserts of this country, or in Alaska, or both. And every single person who's been convicted of a drug-related crime, and 83% of the people who commit crimes of violence have drugs in their system, so it's drug-related when they test the blood of criminals, as they have on some occasions. That's what they find. The federal government should take every one of those people if the city or state says we don't have any room in our jail system. And the city and the state can pay each a third of the operational cost. And as I say, the federal government can do this on government land. It's very hard to build a prison in any city. The people don't want it. They don't want it in their block. They don't have the money to do it. The federal government can do it and has an obligation to do it.
And it won't happen. Why?
It won't happen because the federal government won't do it, and because you have lots of people who say jail is not the answer to crime. I don't know what else is. You know, we don't know what, if anything, rehabilitates a criminal. We know that they age out when they reach the age of 40, maybe because they can't run as fast as a cop at that age anymore. They age out and they stop committing crimes. If I knew...
So you don't, excuse me, you don't believe in rehabilitation?
Oh, please. There are very few criminals get rehabilitated because we don't know what causes it. There are some. Very few. If we knew what created rehabilitation, we'd put it in the pill and we'd give it to them. But the fact is we don't know. And until we find out, we know that while you're in jail, I'm talking about people who have committed crimes of violence, that you're not assaulting somebody. Because you will be. Because most of these people are recidivists. When somebody comes in and says, oh, Your Honor, my client is a first offender, it's never a first offender. It's the first time he's been caught. Those people have committed dozens of crimes, and they're murdering the elderly. And I'm not, some of that's figurative and some of it's literal, but they are making them prisoners in their own homes, and we've got to deal with it. Imagine, supposing in the city of New York, 7.5 million people, and I suspect there are about 50,000 people who are committing most of the felonies, because one criminal commits dozens of crimes before he ultimately goes to jail. Supposing you could take 50,000 people, irrespective of their race or their ethnicity, who they are, but the people who committed the crimes, and put them in jail. Wouldn't this be a glorious city? Wouldn't Newark be a glorious city if the criminals were removed and the decent people, black and white, could live without fear of assault?
Mr. Mayor, can we talk a little bit about this issue of people being homophobic, particularly relevant right now?
Yeah, sure.
Have we progressed in that area or
Look,
in the last 10, 15 years?
The fact is that the American society is obsessed with sex. Particularly, they live vicariously through the sexual lives of politicians and of movie actors.
People used to want to know about your sexuality all the time.
And I don't really care. I don't care whether they think I'm homosexual or heterosexual. I really don't care. I mean, I'm past that. There are people who voted for me thinking I was homosexual, others who are thinking I'm heterosexual, and others who said, what the hell do I care? And I have taken the position, it's none of your business.
But we're obsessed.
Oh, yes, people are obsessed. Nevertheless, I think people are getting better in that area. And I, as mayor, when I came in, one of the first executive orders that I issued was to the effect that the government might not, as it was, discriminate against an individual based on their sexual orientation in jobs or in housing. And then took a long time to get the city council to agree, but I initiated and signed into law a law that says in the private sector, you may not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation with respect to jobs, employment, and housing. The state of New York does not have such a law. The city of New York does.
You have an interesting relationship with Cardinal O'Connor.
I do. We're very good friends.
I'm sure you've been asked this many, many times in connection with his politics, particularly on some of the issues you just raised about gays. Some might argue that the church, the Catholic Church, is not as tolerant as it should be.
This is the wrong kind of discussion. If you don't like your church, leave it, right?
Oh, come on, Mr.
Now,
you don't really believe that?
Just a moment, just a moment. Henry VIII did, you know. The fact is that the Catholic Church, I'm not a Catholic, I'm a Jew, and I'm very proud of what I am and who I am and my traditions. And if you are a Catholic, as the Cardinal has said, it's not a salad bar. You either accept their positions or you're a fallen away Catholic. You have a right to leave your church or to fall away, but you can't say, no, 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 I am going to pick from column A and column B and column C. The Cardinal speaks for the church. Now, you have a right as a Catholic to disagree, but when you disagree, you are violating the rules of your church. You have a right to do that, and if the Cardinal is right, you'll pay for it in heaven or hell.
That being said, Mr. Mayor, you have an opinion on a whole range of things, even though you admit that you're not an expert on everything. Let's talk one more issue about the Catholic Church here that I'm sure you've gotten calls on in your radio program.
Sure.
A lot of cases coming out right now of Roman Catholic priests being accused of molestation, sexual molestation of young boys.
For the most part,
don't you find it inconsistent in any way that the leaders of the Catholic Church are so adamant in saying how wrong homosexuality is, are so outspoken on abortion, so outspoken on so many issues, and seemingly not as outspoken on this particular issue having to do with their own?
Well, I don't agree with you. I think you have a problem with your own faith, if you don't mind my saying so.
No, Mr. Mayor,
that's my conclusion. You
There's
have
a whole
different conclusion.
Absolutely, but there are a whole range of Catholics and non-Catholics who question the Church's commitment.
I want to say to you, I believe that the Cardinal and other prelates that I have talked to are absolutely agonized by the information that comes too often to the fore about priests, in some cases bishops, who have engaged in either homosexual or heterosexual acts which are violative of their bonds to the Church. And I don't think that the Church in the past has acted sufficiently quickly to deal with it, but I know they're agonized, and I think that they are trying to deal with it more quickly than they have in the past.
Let's talk about your relationship with Israel.
Sure.
You've said in some of the things I've read that you're extremely proud of your faith, extremely proud of your connection to Israel. You've been there many, many times.
5 times.
Five times.
Many?
Well, that's more than I've
More
been
than
there.
you have.
Yes.
I wish I could have gone more.
I wish you could have gone, but you such a busy schedule.
Let me
talk to me about.
Let me put it to you. What are you by ethnicity?
Italian.
Okay.
And I have been there.
And have you been to Italy?
Yes, I have.
How many times have you been there?
Once.
Once. Well, you ought to go again. It's a beautiful country. I've been there about 5 times.
I knew it was more than me.
Now, the fact is that people have pride in their ancestry. I'm a proud Jew. I hope you're a proud Italian.
Very much so.
And you don't have to say American Italian or American Jew. We know what we're talking about. This country is different than any other country. You're allowed to treasure your ancestry and your traditions. If you're an Irishman, you're concerned about Northern Ireland and the oppression of Catholics by the British for 800 years, and you should be. And I, similarly, am a Zionist, which translates into support of the Jewish nation. In the same way that if I had parents who came from France, I'd be supportive of the French nation. Now, the reason that Israel is so important to Jews in the diaspora who don't live in Israel and who never will go there, I'm an American citizen. Israel for me is a nice place to visit. I wouldn't want to live there. My home is right here. But I know that every day there are Jews around the world who are persecuted simply because they're Jews, and that there is no country that will take them without regard to whether or not they can support themselves or their age or their health. But Israel says, any Jew who wants to come, who needs assistance, you come. And they demonstrated that in two remarkable emigrations. The one from Ethiopia, the black Jews of Ethiopia, who were persecuted by other blacks in Ethiopia and given no help by the black nations that surrounded Ethiopia, where they sought refuge. They were not given refuge. Now, when Israel saw them, it brought them as though on wings of eagles, as they say in the Bible. 50,000 black Jews of Ethiopia are now living in Israel, and they bring with them their relatives who are not necessarily black. That includes their relatives as well. Similarly, 400,000 Jews from the former Soviet Union were allowed to leave, and no country would take them. Israel said they would take them. So for me, it's raison d'etre, which is as a sanctuary for Jews who are persecuted, becomes clearer every single day.
Mayor Koch, you talk obviously a great deal about New York City, the city you love, but since this is Caucus, New Jersey, there's an audience watching you that doesn't always get a chance to see you. Any special message you'd like to leave the New Jerseyans?
The New Jersey people?
Yes.
If I couldn't live in New York, I might think of living in New Jersey.
That's the best you can do.
It's just a joke, folks.
Okay.
I really like New Jersey, and I really like Governor Florio.
Well, Ed Koch, I want to thank you for joining us on Caucus, New Jersey, this special edition. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank you.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Barnabas Health, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, NJIT, Wells Fargo, PSE&G, Johnson & Johnson, and by New Jersey Sharing Network. Promotional support provided by NJ.com, Small News, Big News, True Jersey, and by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
Hi, I'm Peter Rooney. In 2006, I lost my father to renal disease. He was on the waiting list for a new kidney, but did not receive one in time. Unfortunately, so many like my father have lost their lives while waiting for a life-saving organ. At New Jersey Sharing Network, we're committed to saving and enhancing people's lives through organ and tissue donation and by informing people about this important decision. Because you can make a difference and save a life.